ambiguous use of the word Brahman also appears to have led to some negative implications. There is no doubt that the Buddha was critical of the Brahmins as far as their pretension as a caste was concerned. However, Pali literature holds the word Brahman in high esteem, implying a person of high moral character and insight. The very choice of this word as a title of honor must have actually afforded a fresh strength to the veneration which the word inspired. It is perhaps because of such ambiguities that Émile Sénard felt that there was in fact nothing substantial in the Buddhist clerical order which could ruin the entire caste system, and that the Buddha was not a champion of the cause of lower classes, despite the fact that the Buddhist theory acknowledged the equal rights of all males to be received in the Sangha. In other words, it has been alleged that a marked leaning to aristocracy lingered in the ancient Indian Buddhism as an inheritance from the past. Agreeing with such a viewpoint, Max Weber also feels that Buddhism had no tie with any social movement and as a whole was the product not of the underprivileged but of very clearly privileged strata. Richard Fick feels that the development of caste was in no way broken or even retarded by Buddhism, simply because its doctrine did not aim at a transformation of social conditions, and it was taken for granted that they were unchangeable. Celestin Bouglé also argues that though it cannot be denied that the Buddhists worked to undermine the Brahmins' clientele, they were far from reconstructing the edifice of Hindu society according to new plans. If they worked at replacing the roof, they never gave a thought to changing the foundations. Undeniably, lower castes, especially the Shudras, had a very low representation in the Buddhist order. D.P. Chattopadhyay, taking a balanced view, argues that while it is true that Buddhism was supported by monarchs, merchants, and contemporary aristocrats, it would be superficial to see only this aspect of Buddhism. In his opinion, Buddhism was destined to become, for various reasons, the biggest socio-religious movement in Indian history. He believed that the Buddha's attitude to injustice of the caste system and his attacks upon Brahmanical rituals were significant reasons for its appeal to the people. However, Chattopadhyay also argues that the Buddha created an illusion of liberty, equality, and fraternity by modeling his Sangha on the tribal values, whereas in reality, these values were being trampled upon in the world outside the Sangha. Though the all-pervading influence of the caste system had in fact affected Buddhist way of thinking, yet it cannot be denied that the Buddha threw the doors of his Sangha open to the lowliest of the low who could achieve the bliss of the nirvana. The advantages or disadvantages arising from birth, occupation, and social status were completely irrelevant when it came to recruitment into the Sangha, the only organ of the society over which the Buddha had complete control. However, outside the Sangha, as pointed out by Rice Davids, the Buddha tried to influence public opinion by a constant inculcation of reasonable views. He cites the example of the Amgandha Sutta of the Sutta Nipat, where the Buddha points out that defilement does not come from eating this or that, prepared and given by this or that person, but from evil action, speech and thought. The Buddha also argued that just as the king or the owner of the royal domain should not appropriate all revenues to himself, so also a Brahman or a Shraman should not monopolize all knowledge to himself. In the Buddhist view, anybody could be a teacher irrespective of his caste, and it is said that a teacher is always to be respected, be he a Shudra or a Chandala. In fact, when the Shakyan youths and their employees and Barbar Upali approached the Buddha together for ordination, the Buddha is said to have ordained Upali before the Shakyan youth, so that their pride of birth and caste may be humbled. It is typical of the Buddhist attitude that in a Jatak story, a Brahman loses the charm learnt from a Chandala because of denying his teacher out of shame. A Buddhist monk or a nun never made any distinction between people while begging for food and could approach any householder for a meal or could eat at his house when invited by them. Thus, it cannot be denied that Buddhism left lasting impact on the social organization in India.